Okay, good morning everyone. It begins. Let everyone take their seats. Oh, just like that. Wonderful. Good morning everyone, and welcome to the 14th annual Celebrating Women in Conservation breakfast, hosted by Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia. I'm Rachel Lowry, CEO of Bush Heritage Australia, and I am delighted to be your co-MC this morning alongside my dear friend and colleague.
Hello everyone, my name is Corinne Proske. Sorry about the feedback. And I'm the CEO of Trust for Nature. What an amazing and daunting room. But I would like to start with Rachel and I wanting to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the traditional owners of the land this event is taking place on. I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and welcome any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders in the room. I'd like to recognise the environment and landscapes that they have cared for millennia, and we're all working towards protecting these unceded, important and beautiful lands.
The upcoming 2025 International Women's Day celebrations that we like to think we kick off every year with this event.
You've got to go early.
Is asking us all to imagine a gender-equal world. A world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that's diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Corinne and I thought that was absolutely the right tone to start this morning, and we were just going to ask you all to just keep that vision front of mind as you listen to today's speakers and enjoy the discussions throughout the room.
Thank you, Rachel. We are thrilled to be hosting in this room 540 people. Woohoo! I'm also delighted with the new event, and I think from the few that I've spoken to, we all like the public transport access. So thank you to the team behind who've made that happen. But we also have over 200 online in 14 different groups. That is phenomenal. And we've also got a particular group in Bendigo who are hosted by the North Central CMA, where we've got a group of 70. So hello Bendigo. So whether you're here in the room having a bite with us, or whether you're getting ready for school, and we have some who are here who got out of that, or enjoying breakfast, or just having a moment to sit in nature, our job is to help you wake up on a Friday, and we realise it's a big ask on a Friday, and as someone said to me, won't get up for that many people, but nature matters. And we will hope you are both entertained, well-watered, and definitely caffeinated. So there is tea and coffee circulating, just keep putting your hand up. And finally, we would love and are honoured to thank Sheena Watt, who's an MP joining us here today and taking part in the celebrations. Sheena is a proud Yorta Yorta woman and the Parliamentary Secretary in Victoria for Climate Change, as well as the Parliamentary Secretary for Emergency Services. And unfortunately, we have needed those most recently. And most importantly, she's a hugely important woman in conservation. So we will hear from Sheena a bit later this morning.
So we've come this morning to celebrate women in leadership roles, as well as a diversity of voices.
Leadership starts everywhere, you know.
That's right. The diversity of voices that we need to protect our natural world. So I'd like to kick things off by also extending my respect to all First Nations people in this room this morning. And I'd also like to thank everyone for joining us as I introduce to you Dr. Mandy Nicholson. Mandy is a Wurundjeri, Jaja Wurrung, and Nuri Ilum Wurrung, as well as German woman who has kindly joined us this morning to welcome us to country. Thank you.
Burundap, Yirambaring, Kiripik, Kiripolok, Nugulik. Mundanai, Bikut Bikdui, Banyabik, Mernmutbik, Wurubik, Ba Darangok Bik, Ba Bunjalal, Willamu, Mundanai, Lalal, Ba Gugung Nugulik, Ba Nuguldan, Ba Liwik Balok Nugulik, Ba Nuguldan. My name's Mandy Nicholson. It's way too early for me, but I thought what a great cause, what a great event this is. And I extend my arms to all of you women in this room that are powerful leaders in your own communities, in your household, in your work, and in the struggle to bring country back. And what I mean by bringing country back, as we all know, we walk around the city, we see the creeks and the rivers poisoned, rubbish, overflow, everything. It makes you very sad that country and our waterways aren't healthy. And I just think about country and how we can all together work together to make country as best as it can be in today's world. And as a traditional custodian, there's 3 obligations that I have towards you, and there's 3 obligations that you have to give back to me. And they're simple obligations, but they're very powerful. So taking care of self, that's easy to do. Taking care of others, that's easy to do. And taking care of country sounds easy, but as you all know in this room, it's not easy. We can go and walk around and clean a bit of rubbish out of the waterways or plant some plants, and that's a start, but it's a whole world effort that we need to put our hands together and our minds together to actually create change. And when I think about country and when I welcome people to country, it isn't about, hey, you're welcome, have a great day. It's about understanding how First Nations people see country and how we connect to country, both on a physical level but also a spiritual level. I've always thought, being on country, being raised on country, being born on country, it connected me much more powerfully than if I was off country. But then I think about that, and I studied it at uni. I did a PhD on this topic. Country isn't something that you physically have to be on to have country within you. It's within your murup or your spirit. You can be off country, you can be born off country, your parents can be born off country, but you still have country within you. So it's a spiritual thing. So the balance between the physical and spiritual is the physical level. We can walk on the ground, we can dig into the earth, we can breathe the air, we can look at the sky, we can see the stars at night. But the essential elements of country that entwine all of those layers are how we can connect spiritually. There are small physical ways that we can connect to country. For example, we can get a gum leaf and look at it differently than we've ever looked at it before. We look at the green colour, we look at the main vein down the middle of the leaf, then we look at the veins that branch off that. But then look deeper than that, look at the smaller veins. Even get like a magnifying glass out. You'll see so many beautiful veins on that leaf. And then when the leaf dies, it doesn't die in my eyes, but it gets regenerated into the earth. It loses all of that green, it loses not the structure of the leaf, but the veins are the tiny little veins are still there, like a skeleton of that gum leaf. And I think about that gum leaf curled up. It's been young, it's been growing, it's curled up now, it's ready to go back into the ground. But no matter what stage of life that leaf is, you can still crush it and smell that eucalyptus oil in that leaf. So you're using your senses to connect to country. We're also in the middle of the city, we can tune out of everything that's going on around us. And I drove in this morning and saw all these beautiful balloons. I thought, I've got to do that because there's no sound except for the horrendous sound of the fire. But in the silent moments, you're floating above the city, you're floating above country, and you're looking at country from a different perspective. So you're tuning out of everything else and you're enjoying that moment. Take your shoes off, walk in the grass, close your eyes, tune out of the city noise, the swearing, the car horns, all of that, and the bustleness, if that's a word, in the city, and tune in to other sounds that you don't usually listen out for in the city, and they're the birds. You'll hear dun dun, the rainbow lorikeet. You'll hear wah, the raven. You'll hear, there's gamayil this morning. They got a really unusual sound. What do you call it in English? Can't remember. That's great that I can't remember in English. The corella. And you start to think of things from a different perspective. You look at things differently. So the three things were taking care of self, others, and country. Tuning into nature like that is one way to do that. So when I talk about layers of country, you've got below country, bikut. That's where as you all know, the ground is that life-giving layer with all the bugs and grubs and the roots of the trees and everything in there. So that's that first and initial layer of country. Then it's connected to the layer above that, which is on country. So on country is where we gather, do our ceremonies, balance out our life that we're busy working, being parents, being grandparents, whatever we do, we need to make sure our spiritual self remains up there as well. We can't sort of get too busy in our work, except what you guys are doing, because it's amazing. And then above that, we've got Banyabik, which is water country that, as I was mentioning, it's not healthy anymore, but we used to gift water from country to say, hey, everything's safe while you're here. Hopefully one day we can do that again. I heard that they want to make a swimming area in the Birarang. Good luck with that. I really mean that seriously, because no one's taking care of country with those 3 points that I mentioned. So once that starts happening, everyone can swim in that river and not get sick. Then above that, we've got Murnmutbik, which is wind country that blows the smoke from our welcoming fires and carries our ngulu, or our voice, up to Bunjil. And then above that, we've got Wurruwurrubik, the physical layer, where we see the physical form of our creation beings, so they're usually the flying creatures. And then above that, even at night time, you've got the other part of the sky that we don't see during the day is Darangolbik. So you really love the name that we use for star country. Darang means tree, Golk is stick, and Biik is country. So it really sort of wraps up why we're all here today. Looking at layers of country differently, looking at the stars and understanding that what we see as First Nations people up in the stars is actually reflected down here on Earth, and how we can all work together in all of those beautiful layers of country to make this world a better place. So I just wanted to say huge congratulations to all of you people in this room, mainly women, and the men that are supporting to create change, because if anything's going to make change, it's women. So thank you. We're going to have a dance performance now. So Jiri Jiri was started, way back in 2013. We're a women's dance group, but we're the only Wurundjeri women's dance group around that sing in the Woiwurrung language. Unfortunately, you won't hear my beautiful singing voice this morning. I'm on hiatus. I only talk these days. But it's all about connecting to country from our perspective. So the first dance that we're going to do is our Womanjika Nyarka welcome dance, and it's all about being loud, being proud, and being heard, because no one else can make ourselves heard but ourselves. So the first line of this song is "We are strong black women." So this is our Womanjika Nyarka.
Warangere, warangere, naramo.
Tula Bagaro, Nagaje, 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 Wanganino, Tula Bagaro, Wanganino, Tula Bagaro, Nagaje, 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 Winmayo, Corinne, Darling Mariamo, Momelamo, Woman Jeka, Woman Jeka. Thank you. So we've got two more dances. So the next one's all about our namesake, the willy wagtail, Jitty Jitty. And it's about this particular bird being a spirit's messenger. And in other First Nation cultures around Australia, sometimes it's a messenger for bad things happening. Phew, lucky, it's good here. So this one's all about teaching the next generations how to dance. So basically you've got the lead dancers, which are the willy wagtails, that have come from, these are the words of the song. He's come from a long, long time ago to teach us how to dance. So we've got, anyone doing the tail? Yeah, so we're representing the generational learning. So we've got the main dancers teaching the tail how to move in a metaphorical sense. So this is our Jitty Jitty Nyarga, a willy wagtail dance. Wiri giri al moropo, wiri giri al moropo, wiri giri al moropo, jiri jiri, jiri jiri, waranna nyargan nyapo, janna nyargan nyapo, waranna nyargan nyapo, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. Dumba nyarga dulap, dumba nyarga dulap, dumba nyarga dulap, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. Waramba nyarga bulak kudamba, nyarga bulak kudamba, nyarga bulak, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. Brokok nyarga maram brokok, nyarga maram brokok, nyarga maram, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. Nyarkanya yalengos, nyarkanya yalengos, nyarkanya yalengos, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. Mundanai nyarga bulak, mundanai nyarga bulak, mundanai nyarga bulak, jiri jiri, jiri jiri. And I just wanted to mention these three queens up here on stage. I'm very, very proud of what they do in terms of being leaders, because I've heard leadership being spoken about. They teach and educate and mentor the younger girls in our group. So I just wanted to shout out for them. Yeah. And I also forgot to mention, I'm a former Narrap Ranger. And a few of the girls are going up there. There's more girls than boys in that group now. They're going up to Cairns soon for a Women in Conservation something or other. Gathering, forum, I don't know. But I'm really proud that Narrap team have so many women in their ranks these days. So I just want to shout out for them as well. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, Kim. Yeah. So the final dance that we're going to do is our Babandarang, so our mother tree dance. And this one's all about, you notice the running theme is about strong women, but this one is about a tree that grew for hundreds of years and saw everything living in harmony. The water was fresh, kids playing, women talking, men hunting, all this kind of thing. Everything was happening for generations. And for hundreds of years she saw this happen, but then invasion happened and she was cut down, but the roots grew deep, and the deep roots represent language. The trunk represents the strength and knowledge of our elders. The shoots represent our leaders, our community leaders. And then over those hundreds of years of life, she dropped hundreds of seeds. and then the mother nurtured them to become the babandarang themselves, the mother trees. This is our last dance, and I'll stop talking now. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mandy, for your moving welcome. And it totally resonates that country is more than physical. Country is a place in the heart. And those stories, and particularly the Jiri Jiri dance, really resonated. I spent much of my childhood watching and playing with Willy Wagtails. And it's always an honour to be a witness of dances like this, which are from the world's oldest culture. So thank you to the Jiri Jiri dancers.
Yeah. Yeah, that was absolutely beautiful. I'm going to ask you just to look around this room for a moment, because in this beautiful room of ours, we have many people that work across the conservation sector, across all sorts of roles, from making sure we get those boots out there on the ground through to board positions and everything in between. We also have an incredible room full of conservation allies, some of whom I discovered this morning have been coming every year for at least 10 years. And so I feel like every event is a different chapter, where I just take one new insight or new inspiration away. It was really nice to hear people share this morning, with the very brief conversations I had before we jumped up here on stage, what motivates people to get out of bed so early. And it's different things for different people. But I do know that...
But I have had a request for lunch.
Already?
Yeah.
But I also know people come to see and hear more about the work that's happening from many, many people like those in Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage, who are very dedicated and tenacious and committed to ensuring that we do all that we can to protect our natural world. Now, Corinne and I could talk about that for days, but we're not going to do that. Instead, we're going to cue 2 videos and try to let the pictures tell 1,000 words. I think that's where I say cue the video. Thanks.
Over millions of years, our ecosystems have evolved to support billions of diverse species. They bring an irreplaceable beauty to our world, sustain us and enliven our curiosity. Here in Australia, our unique ecosystems allow animals and plants found nowhere else in the world to thrive, one of which sparked the beginning of Bush Heritage Australia. In 1991, our founders raised the funds to purchase 2 forest blocks and prevent them from being sold and logged. A dedicated community was born, and our mission to heal and protect the bush. Over the years, Bush Heritage has grown into a leading conservation not-for-profit. Now our impact spans the continent and its waters through our vast reserve network and partnerships. We apply science and the knowledge of Australia's First Nations people to guide our actions and build resilience into our landscapes and restore habitat for precious wildlife. We see possibility far and wide and walk in harmony with First Nations people and our agricultural partners to make sure our on-ground impact is deep, collaborative and long-lived. Working from one horizon to the next, for the smallest ant and the tallest tree, for you and those who follow in your footsteps. By 2030, we are working towards an ambitious plan to deepen and double our impact. This work is made possible by our supporters. With your help, we can achieve these ambitious targets. Our life and our future depend on these complex ecosystems, and they depend on us.
I can't believe that we own 32 acres where we can just immerse ourselves, we get away from all the toils and anxieties of life, and you're one with nature. So I'm Rudy Michelson, and this is my wife Jennifer, and we're at our bush block that we love here in Borneo.
We're sort of halfway between Arthur's Seat and Greens Bush National Parks, and we're on Bunurong country.
We acquired this property 11 years ago. We thought, what a wonderful block of land. Bugger it, life is short. Let's just buy the thing.
It just feels wonderful to see some of the original vegetation. And endangered species, everything from the charismatic, powerful owls. I'm looking out for tea tree fingers fungi, which is nationally endangered, which we should have on the site. Like, there's so much to learn. You never stop learning about it.
Jennifer and Rudy are prime examples of the types of custodians we see across Victoria. They're passionate, and when they talk about their land, it comes from a deep place of hope and care. I'm Corinne Proske, and I'm the CEO of Trust for Nature. Trust for Nature is looking at encouraging landholders significantly to think about nature and protection. So we help build that estate of Victoria that needs to be protected forever.
We have covenanted the property here because we want every level of protection that we can to preserve this block. And we want to preserve the block in terms of fighting off invasive species and in the legal sense too.
It's also really important because it is adjacent to the national park, and very often the most important public land and private land is the meshing of the two. We really need to get a tessellation across landscapes.
Covenanted properties are exempted from paying land tax, so everyone's experienced hikes on land tax in the last year or two. And if you want to sidestep that and do something for the environment and for future generations, covenant.
It's all about the people we work with. We really are here to enable them to be the best they can, and together we'll be able to protect Victoria's wonders.
We feel like we are doing everything we can to protect this property.
And to feel like that we're stewards of it for a period of time is just such a pleasure.
And we want to maximise the insurance to protect this land for as long as we can.
I just want to point out that Jennifer is right at the front here. It's just an honour to have our talent in the room.
I love seeing our two organisations profiled alongside one another because the collaboration between Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature is a very deep one that only grows deeper year on year. And I think that we often talk about collaborative leadership and collective leadership when we're in this room together. It was just earlier this morning, I think it was Estelle who walked in the room and said, you know what, with the current global political climate that we're in, I'm really glad to be in this room today. Because quite frankly, the world is screaming for more collaboration and more collective vision. And we all know in this room what's needed between now and 2030. We know what needs to get done, and our work has never been more important, particularly in the context of climate change. So I just want to give a shout out to everyone, whether you work for Bush Heritage or Trust for Nature or other orgs. We have got a superpower across our sector, which is that shared vision, and it's going to absolutely continue to come to the fore over the months and years ahead as we head to 2030.
Really couldn't agree with Rachel more, and we have continued to deepen how we work together. But I promise there'll be no conversations around tech giants or presidents in this room. We are here to actually make a proper difference.
Okay, so if we're not going to talk tech giants or presidents, what we might talk then is favourite highlights over the last year. And Corinne, I know you've got one that you shared with me recently that I'd love for you to share with the room because it's a bit of a holy grail of career highlights for those of us in the conservation sector, I like to think.
So Rachel, over the last year, I've travelled at least 20,000 kilometres across the state, and I've just continued to be impressed that you don't have to leave Victoria to see amazing places. From red dirt to white sands to mountains to deserts, we have it all here in our backyard. But what has impressed me even more has been the people who sit in these landscapes. And all I can say is thank you. Thank you for the inspiration and for the work that allows nature to thrive. Several weeks ago, I met this absolute inspiration, a gentleman named Mick Dexter, who's turned 100 this year. And a couple of decades ago, he had a real vision for his horse paddock, which he then restored. It is now 5 hectares in Heathmont, in the middle of suburbia, and he's handed it to both Trust for Nature and the local council, and you can go and visit it. It's called Dexter's Bush. And people like that who have chosen and have a vision for what could be possible for future generations are an absolute inspiration. And he's so focused as to what happens in the future. And Mick is one of many people we see like this. There are people throughout the state, throughout the nation, throughout the globe who are taking the time to think about nature and thinking about the future. But my highlighted moment, and I've changed for it, hands down, was spotlighting earlier on this year at the back of a ute and coming face to face with the Holy Grail, the elusive Plains Wanderer. Can you see it in the front?
That is absolutely the right noise we were going for. Thank you. It's awesome.
This was such an inspiration. I literally did not sleep after. I thought, if being CEO at Trust for Nature was one thing, seeing the Plains Wanderer was the main KPI out of the role. I'm done.
Yep. Do you want to explain how that T-shirt came to be? After Corinne told me her story, she said, Rachel, career highlight. You know how sometimes you think your phone might be listening to you? I looked at my phone and there is this T-shirt, I'm a rare bird, and it's got a picture of a plains wanderer, and I was talking about how envious I was because I have not seen one in the wild yet, but I am going to Bulkamata Reserve in a few months' time, and I'm told that that's where there are the most plains wanderers known to be all in one place, so I'm holding out high hopes come June.
We had a bit of competition who has the most plains wanderers in the wild. So
and Bush Heritage won.
Yeah. We've got all the landholders on the Patho Plains are doing their fair share. And I heard during the week that one of the researchers saw 19 out there in one night.
That's very cool. It's very, very cool. We also went out to dinner recently and we realised we were having a Plains Wanderer off with our Plains Wanderer knowledge, and Corinne won. She absolutely won that one. But for anyone sitting in the room who's going, Plains Wanderer, okay, hadn't heard of them before, well, that's okay. We're not going to judge you. Critically endangered grassland species here in Victoria that absolutely needs all the protection across its remaining landscape and management of that landscape.
And I think for me, and I'll do my little nature geek out, why are they so important? They're globally significant. Their closest relative is a shorebird in South America. So this is the last of a species that used to inhabit this continent in a time gone. It is up to us to make sure it continues to thrive.
See how she won the Plains Wanderer off? Yeah, that's how it was done. Well, we did think it was the right room to celebrate rare birds, so hence the T-shirts. I think it's over to you.
So, now another very important rare bird, and we have a T-shirt for her. I would like to introduce to you the Parliamentary Secretary for Climate Action and Yorta woman and superstar Sheena Watt. We'll give you the gift before the speech.
Okay. Do I still need to do it? Oh, wow. Thank you. Okay. Well, I've just learnt about this bird and now I've got it on a shirt, so it's a good morning. And to everyone here, good morning. Thank you for welcoming me here. I'm not going to look on either side because there's my face and like the most giant I've ever seen it. So it'd be really good if. So please don't be offended, those on the side, if I don't look at you at all. But I'll start with thanking Mandy Nicholson. Thank you for welcoming us here this morning. Thank you for starting our day with culture, with deepening our understanding of country and all that we must do for it. Any morning where I wake up and the first people I see and the first conversations I have are about country and protecting country, well, I know they're going to be a good day. So thank you for starting all of our mornings like that today. I'm so very grateful. And thank you also for your studies into living off country, and as an Aboriginal woman who was born off country and has never lived on country her whole life. In fact, I think I count the amount of times I've spent on country in hours, not days. It's hours, and for me that's never enough. And but to have you speak so clearly about how you can live off country, be born off country, but still so connected, matters a great deal. So thank you for your research, and I hope that it changes minds and understanding about what it is to be an Aboriginal person living in the big smoke. I'm so grateful to you. Thank you so very much. And I'm going to take your messages about loud, proud and being heard. I might take that because I don't have one of those, words for the year. Does anyone start the year off on all the optimistic resolutions? And I'm going to have a word of the year. No, I don't have one, but I've now got 3. So thank you for locking that in, because it's almost March and I hadn't gotten there yet. So doing really well, clearly. I also want to acknowledge that I am in the company of some incredible leaders in the world of conservation, including Andrew Brooks. It's so good to see you again, the chair, and Corinne, hiya, bestower of fabulous T-shirts and CEO of Trust for Nature, Sue O'Connor and Rachel Lowry, and other trustee and board members from Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage. Can I just also acknowledge my predecessor in a previous life, Nina Baird, who I understand has also served on the Trust for Nature board. I know you're here because There you are. Hello, hi. Big fan of you, my sister. Love your work, always. And also we're here with so many other inspirational and influential people, organisations like Zoos Victoria, Landcare Australia, Greening Australia. You can whoop if that's your organisation, like I don't mind. And the Australian Land Conservation Alliance. Look, that's just some. There's others. But I didn't get the full list, nor did I really want to read them all out because there's just far too many and you're all too amazing. But most importantly, thank you to the many individuals here in the room today who through time, your commitment, your passion, have continued to support biodiversity through conservation across the state. Your support is absolutely invaluable. Yeah, I've come here before, so it was a really good thing. And as soon as I seen it, I said yes, because I recalled the energy in the room and it blew me away and kept me going for, I'm going to say a week, but it was probably longer. And I knew that I had to come this time around again. So thank you so very much. And before we get into International Women's Day, we've got this theme of March Forward. And I thought about it, and I've got to tell you that marching forward is one thing, but it also requires decisive steps and decisive action. We need to convince ourselves and others that there is more work to be done, and we do that through action and continuing our efforts. And for me, it really resonated in relation to conservation efforts. We must march forward together if we're to drive meaningful change in gender equality and in protecting our natural environment. Women and gender diverse people play a crucial role in environment and the conservation sector. We bring a distinct, vital voice to problem solving, which is necessary when it comes to tackling problems as vast as the biodiversity crisis and climate change. I want to take a moment to call out not just the women in the room, which there are so very many of, but also the work that you've done to drive really significant targets and goals around environmental conservation, safeguarding biodiversity and addressing the climate emergency. It cannot be met without your leadership and your involvement and your voice being heard many, many times, and I'm so delighted to hear that the number of NANUP Rangers is now so full of incredible women. It fills me up, and I know it's not in the script, but you know, when you're having that like a crisis in high school and you're trying to work out like what you want to do with the whole rest of your life, and you have to like fill it out in a form on some deadline. Like, what am I doing? And I will tell you that on that form, when I imagined exactly where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do, I put down with great hope and enthusiasm a ranger course up in Cairns. And I often, when this job gets tough, I think, imagine what my days would be like if I was like a ranger. Yeah. So that's the one that I come back to time and time again. And as I've gone to the graduation of the Rangers with Trust for Nature, I reflected on the fact that, look, I failed the chainsaw course, so I probably wasn't going to be that good at it because that was something that I did when I came down here. I thought, yeah, no, I can get back into it, and then I failed chainsaw. So it was never actually ever going to happen. But I do take the moments to reflect. And so to those Rangers, I've got to tell you, like, you're all my heroes because you can handle some equipment that is just spectacular. I know and want to highlight your work, the work that's being done around climate change and its fundamental long-term threat to biodiversity. And we know that protecting and restoring biodiversity is a vital part of the solution, and it absorbs carbon and reduces further greenhouse gas emissions. Look, there's so many of you in the room that are working tirelessly, marching forward with nature-based solutions for the climate crisis. And I've got some examples. We've seen them on the video, and they include the 1,700 private landholders who've taken the courageous and generous steps to place a Trust for Nature conservation covenant on their property. To each and every one of you, if you're here, can you just like give yourself some love, like, because this is incredible. And give love to each other. And so many of you have made a really brave decision about your banking and your finance decision, and are working with organisations like Bank Australia, who have permanently protected 2,117 hectare conservation reserve in Western Victoria. That's an incredible choice, thank you. And there is also the permanently protecting of habitat, which prevents carbon from being released into the atmosphere and keeps our air fresh and our waterways clean. Can I just also shout out that the land protected by Trust for Nature through conservation covenants and nature reserves stores approximately 4.2 million tonnes of CO2 annually in Victoria alone. I'm still trying to grapple the enormous numbers in this work, I've got to tell you, but when they give me like what that means, then it makes a lot of sense, which I'm very happy to report is equal to removing more than 4 million cars from our roads per year. And to Bush Heritage, my goodness, your network of reserves across Australia stores approximately 45.7 million tonnes of carbon and annually sequesters more than 306,000 tonnes of carbon per year, equivalent to 66,000 cars off the road. That's pretty awesome, but I've got to tell you, when I heard about the Goreng Noongar country work that you've been doing, that's the one that fills me up. So and that is a collaboration with Green Fleet to run a climate-ready restoration trial in Victoria involving seedlings of the same species that have already adapted to the climate, protected for the Nadu Hills in 70 years' time when the trees reach their maturity. And of course, I'll take a moment to shout out Dr. Dominic Hess. I know you're here. I've seen you. Where are you? Hello. Hi. Thank you for your work. We did a course together a long time ago. We were, oh, hi. Yeah, we did. I like to follow your work and I'm a big fan still. And then I read about this and I'm like, yep, that sounds exactly like something Dr. Dominic could do. So can I also say the Victorian Government is taking some really long-term actions to reduce the impact of climate change on the environment. We're a leader and I can read out a whole bunch of statistics and hot facts if you like, or not. I'm seeing the not enthusiasm be like really high here in the morning and I'm okay with that, that's all right. But I will just say that we are continuing to invest in Trust for Nature to protect some of Victoria's most crucial habitat on private land. So congratulations to Trust for Nature for your Habitat Forever campaign, seeking to scale over the next 5 years through a shared investment of $75 million. Through Habitat Forever, Trust for Nature is seeking to grow the revolving fund program, securing more covenants and protecting more special places, work alongside First Peoples to care for country. Oh, that fills me up, your work with Mob. Oh, it's so good. And supports the 1,700 covenanters. Is that how you say it? I don't know, I've just made it up. Already making significant contribution. These are just some of the examples of the work that's progressing to protect our state's environment for many generations to come. There's always more work to be done, and I'm just gonna big note a bit because I can. I was meeting some big flash EU types last Friday morning, and we had this conversation about all the things that they're doing over there, and I began with acknowledging country, and they said, oh, it's all very different here with your work with Indigenous peoples. And then I dropped some hot facts about how much of our country is owned and managed by First Peoples. And so you can't do all the things that you've laid out in your big, bold vision here in this country unless you are working with First Peoples each and every day. And that's why I was so excited to see and hear and talk about to these big shot ambassadors and that about all the work that we're doing with First Peoples, because they had not a clue. And so we are doing it different. We are doing it in a uniquely Australian way, and we are remembering that this land always was and always will be Aboriginal land, and we are just the current generation looking after it. So thank you so very, very much, and let's continue to celebrate and learn from all the voices, especially the fabulous women voices, Go Sisters, and draw upon those perspectives as we continue our conservation efforts. Marching forward, united, fighting, and what's my new word for the year? Help me out, sister. It's loud, proud, and being heard. Yep, that's right. You heard it here. Okay.
Thank you so much, Sheena. Thanks also for giving a shout out to the awesome crew at Zoos Victoria. I know we've got a couple of them in the room today. We talk Plains Wanderers, but yeah, hear it up for Zoos Victoria because they're helping breed Plains Wanderers and very much keeping hope alive for that species. As we continue to protect landscapes, we want to make sure we have individual animals that we can get out there, founders to rebreed and get these populations going, so hats off there. Thanks also for raising the important work that we do from a climate context. I spoke at an event in Adelaide fairly recently and someone said, oh, you did pretty well, but you missed out on the fact that a lot of what Bush Heritage is doing and what we're all doing when we're protecting landscapes is we're taking climate action, and so often we think about the species and the biodiversity, but that individual said, my wife and I support your work because if we're going to have any chance of getting our way out of the climate crisis, we need to make sure that the nature that's standing right now keeps standing. So it was great to see that recognition as well. Thank you. Now, a bit of housekeeping before we take our first break for a bite to eat and a good chat. Firstly, the all-important bathroom location. If you haven't worked it out already, then your bladder's better than mine, but it's back out into the foyer and to the left. Also, a reminder that on your tables there are QR codes, so you can check in and see who's in the room and what table they're at and get up and move about and say hello.
And we also have a number of great prizes that are on offer this morning. We have a 2-night stay at the Mount Avoca Eco Lux Lodge, a $500 gift card from Patagonia, and my son's already asked whether he can get that. A Country Road gift card for an amount of $250 and a Eucalyptus Australia prize pack. All these gifts, all the guests have been automatically entered into the draw, and we will actually be drawing those at 10:15 this morning. So make sure you stick around to see whether you are the lucky winner from these terrific gifts.
Amazing. Corinne and I would like to offer our deepest gratitude to our fabulous sponsors this morning that make this breakfast possible. Firstly, our corporate partner ANZ on tables 16 and 29. Thank you all so much. I'm going to zap. ANZ have booked a table each year, and then last year they said, you know what, we'll sponsor the next one. So thank you, and we're going to hear from Christina later on.
We also have incredible 4 partners this year sponsoring this event. And we are really grateful for their support. Joining us this year at the leading land management group, Cassinia Environmental, Table 4. Thank you, Paul, for the 2nd year running for supporting us. We love working with you, both at Trust for Nature and at Bush Heritage. It's amazing. You guys are visionary and we are doing great things in Victoria.
Yeah. Let's give them a good clap. So worthy. So worthy. To the project delivery experts at TBH Consultancy, who are at table 8 and have come on board for a 2nd year supporting this event. To the TBH crew, we are very fortunate to have you join us again, so thank you so much. And I know that Bush Heritage gets to benefit from your project management might from time to time, so thanks for that as well. We also have new partners, King and Wood Mallisons are joining us on table 15. Thank you so much, Mark and team, and we might do a clap for both those 2 sponsors.
And finally, we have Yarra Valley Water on table 3, which have also generously contributed to today's event. Thank you, Nina and team. Now I can see the wonderful staff at Sofitel who woke up this morning and went,
Women in Conservation breakfast. That'll be interesting. And they're going home going, let's talk about the Plains Wanderer, I hope, who are right now serving our breakfast.
Now they know what it is.
Yep, might have already. I think it's going to be the right time to take a bit of a break shortly and make sure that we allow ourselves some time to catch up and chat with one another.
For our virtual audiences, you'll be treated to some videos from both Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage during the break. Lucky you. You can also use your Zoom chat to say g'day to the others online. So see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Okay. For those that missed it, there's definitely more time to chat built into today's agenda at the end. But we had to cut that slightly shorter than we had planned, just because we ran slightly over time, which tends to happen at these events at the first half. Okay, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our 2025 keynote speaker, Arabana woman Teagan Shields from Curtin University, who will be speaking today on empowering Aboriginal-led traditional knowledge for biodiversity conservation in Australia. When I read that out to my son Cooper earlier, who's in the room, he said, wow, that's a lot of words. And I am absolutely confident that we're going to be grateful for every single one of them. So please give Teagan a warm welcome.
Well, wow, what a room. I will say that I'm a tiny bit nervous, but I'm assured that you're a very warm crowd. What a tough act to follow from our deadly sister here and wonderful Auntie Mandy and the amazing dancers. What a way to fill our cups at the start. I too want to start by acknowledging country and our old people who empower us to come here and have these conversations, and also our allies that make space in these places for us to share our thinking. I think, I've just spent the last week, I've told a couple of people I've been up and down the country actually, started in Sydney, then Brisbane, but I've been fortunate enough to sit in board meetings this week with some amazing Aboriginal leaders, and they really do inspire me to do better and to fight for country, and to try and change the status quo in terms of what we're doing and thinking. I want to also acknowledge the amazing people in this room. I've run into a couple of people and there is so much talent and goodwill and skill in here that I am in awe. I acknowledge women in conservation from, cane toad hunters or collectors to our amazing women rangers in the desert who are the most exceptional trackers for cats. There's so many more women involved in this space that aren't in this room, and I do want to acknowledge them. Sorry. Thank you. So I just want to start with a little bit of my background and who I am and a bit about our people. So my grandfather was part of the stolen generation. He was taken off country when he was 3. He was put into a boys' home, and at 16 he absconded and ended up in the Merchant Navy and travelled up to Newcastle, Awabakal country, and that's where he stayed. And so Auntie Mandy's talking around being removed from country and not living on country or not spending time on country but still being connected to country really resonated with me. We very much grew up with culture and a lot of time in the bush, and our grandfather taught us how to feel country in every sense of the word. We'd go through the bush and he would say, oh, touch that tree, and you would touch it. And he would say, how does it feel? And if it was cold or wet, he'd say, leave it there, it's still growing. If it was dry and warm, he'd say, take it, we're going to have a big campfire, let's bring it with us. And so that real deep connection with country has been ingrained in me from a very young age. It was always very much 1 for you and 2 for the bush. And we really did interact with country. We heard from both of our speakers before around that aspiration to be a ranger. And I think it was something that was always in the back of my mind, but actually not what I set out to do. I thought I wanted to be in the health space and be a physiotherapist, but I just didn't quite get there with my marks. And at the very bottom of my list for my uni selections, I actually picked applied science in Lismore because there was a ranger potential job, and I thought, oh, that sounds great. So, you know, off I went to Lismore to do applied science, and I really loved it. But this same message kept coming out to me, and it was, you know, you're a woman, you're probably not going to get a job. And, you know, that was some of the very first conversations, and it made me reflect on times in science growing up, and, you know, we'd have physics teachers say, oh, you're the exception to the rule, you can read a map. And I'm so humbled and grateful that just in that 20 years we've come so far in acknowledging women's roles in science and conservation. Anyway, to kind of cut a long story short, I picked up education and I became a high school science teacher for a while. So I never actually made it out in the field to be a ranger, although I did do a bit of marine biology on the reef for a while, and I'm so grateful for that experience. You know, a lot has changed in that 20 years. I remember being so fortunate to have an Aboriginal man as a lecturer at uni, Stephen Schneerer, and talking to him on the side about integration of Indigenous knowledge and how could we do that better, you know. And at that time, it just wasn't taught at uni, you know, this idea of valuing Indigenous knowledge for conservation. They were secret little conversations off to the side. And even then, when I first finished my undergrad, I really wanted to go and do research in that space. And I actually applied to do a PhD 3 times and was never successful because of the topic. You know, it wasn't accepted in that mainstream way. I've just come out of the PhD journey, and I was so fortunate to have an amazing supervisor in Brendan Whittle who really let me do what I wanted to do. And one of the first things that I said to him at the start of that journey was, I really want to do something tangible for Mob. I don't want to kind of come out with this theorised PhD. And so I worked heavily on culturally significant entities. And again, you know, our amazing dancers that were out here this morning with their possum on, that was kind of where this journey started for me. You know, I was 19, we were doing a cultural revival project where we were making a possum skin cloak. And one of the aunties said to me, you've gone to university, you're doing science, you need to do an ethics statement about how we're making this cloak. And then it occurred to me, how strange, you know, we're told to embrace our culture when it's seen to be this nice kind of art process, but not our whole culture. Imagine what it would be like if we had our men out there gathering those possums and skinning them and actually reclaiming all of that culture. And why is it that our legislation and policy settings, you know, kind of prevent that? And so, you know, I spoke to Brendan about that topic, and serendipitously, I can't even talk. At the same time, we started to go through this reform process with the EPBC Act, the Salmon Review, which I know a lot of you will have been heavily invested in. And so, you know, that really set me on this journey about how do we actually champion Indigenous way of knowing and being and enact that into legislation and policy. So that's what I really focused on. I think it would be remiss of me not to acknowledge the amazing mentors and people who have shaped and changed my direction over my career, including Melissa George, Dawn Townsend, Leah Talbot, Josie Douglas, who showed me that actually you can sit in this Western system and champion Indigenous knowledge. But equally, we have many male leaders in this space that are really advocating to elevate women's voices and Indigenous voices. I'm very fortunate to work under Professor Stephen Van Leeuwen at Curtin University, who has really championed my way of thinking and making sure that women's voices are heard throughout that. Also, Ricky Archer, who's now the Director of National Parks. I remember when he first rang me up to come onto the board of NAUSMA, and he was so adamant that a woman's voice, an Indigenous woman's voice, needed to be at the table for NAUSMA. And also, you know, through the Biodiversity Council and their co-governance model with Indigenous peoples, really bringing women's voices to the front, but also Indigenous people. I touched slightly just before, you know, we're in this really strange time with this EPBC Act legislation where it kind of feels like we're on hold. We've all invested significantly into that process, and I know personally for me, I was actually in labour putting a submission into the EPBC Act. And that little boy that I birthed some time ago is now about to turn 4. So this isn't just a short process, you know, we've been at this for what feels like is probably 5 years, 2019, right? And I just look at that process and I think, do you know what? We don't have to wait to find out what happens with that piece of legislation. As a collective, we are very powerful, you know, and we can start to make change. We'll wait and see what happens with that piece of legislation. But I talk to business and industry quite a bit, and I think that there is a real willingness to actually do better and to move forward and be future thinking and really tackle some of these hard issues. What I find in those conversations is that they just need a little bit of help. They need some guidance. They want to do the work, but they want to be told how. And so I think it's our responsibility in this room to help them with that direction. We're really fortunate to have some really strong international settings, particularly when we talk about the integration of Indigenous knowledges and values, when we look to the Global Biodiversity Framework that's moving towards biocultural objectives and indicators, but also, you know, things like UNDRIP that are really trying to set the scene about what direction we should be taking, so we can take guidance from that if we don't get it from the national legislation. I want to acknowledge the role that the Indigenous protected or Indigenous protected area or Indigenous conservation estate plays towards meeting some of those international obligations. And, you know, I was going to spend today kind of talking about the value of the Indigenous estate, and then I really kind of thought about it, and you know what, we can't articulate it because nobody's really done the work to accurately reflect what the value of the Indigenous estate is. We know that we've got over 120 ranger groups federally, but we don't know how many more we've got when we do the numbers at a state level and what are philanthropically funded. So I can't tell you the exact number. We know that we've got over 80 formally registered IPAs and how big that is. But, you know, what about all of those other groups that are actually working to conserve conservation on country? I think the other issue is that, you know, the general public person wouldn't know what an Indigenous protected area is or an IPA. And so we've got a role to raise awareness about that and the value that they play. You know, these programs are not just about protecting biodiversity, they're about empowering communities, creating jobs, revitalising cultural practice, and also healing. So when we recognise Indigenous knowledge and conservation, for me, you know, we've heard the other girls talk about it before, but it is a really complex system. It is about connection to country. It's about people. It's about country itself, but it's also about the knowledge system that's within it. And we know from Aboriginal culture that if country's not healthy, we actually start to lose knowledge. So, you know, if you go out bush and you see an animal and one of those old aunties, they'll say, oh, you know, this is that animal's story, and they'll go on and on about it. But if that animal didn't come up, would have they been able to share that knowledge? So healthy country in terms of revitalising culture is so important. You know, it's funny because sometimes I'll go home to my dad and he'll take one look at me and he'll be, put that phone down. Oh, okay, quick, get your shoes, we're going. Oh, where are we going? And we all know that mob really like Facebook Marketplace, so the whole time I'm thinking, hang on, you're on your phone more than me. And he'll take me out bush and he'll make me walk through country and feel country and reset. And so he can just look at me and see, actually, you need to go back out. We also know that Indigenous knowledge evolves with country. And I think back to my uni days and, you know, Darwin mob Larrakia talking about mangroves and how they were really concerned about them, because even then, 20 years ago, they could start to see the shift in the seasons and that impact. And I'm in this interesting place in academia where, you know, it's about validating knowledge systems. It's about making sure the science is rigorous. And for me, that's quite hard, because sometimes I think, I believe that auntie there. I don't need to prove it. And so how do we shift our thinking in terms of actually acknowledging that Indigenous knowledge is a system within its own right, and it's valid, and it has evolved for generations, and it is still evolving today? So, it's a little bit of a yarn, and usually when I kind of talk at these, never of this size, people will come up to me afterwards and they'll say, oh, that was great, but how do we do it? So what I wanted to kind of end on is a couple of little seeds of ideas that you can maybe take home to your organisations and think differently about how you are actually embedding Indigenous knowledge, or what your organisation can do. So in no order except for maybe the first one, which is, supporting Indigenous-led solutions, genuine collaboration of knowledge systems, and Indigenous decision making. And for me, part of that is actually stepping back and handing over the power and saying, you guys can make the decisions. We're comfortable with that. But importantly too, actually being genuine and making sure that your intent of engagement with mob matches the outcome. And maybe this is because I've spent too much time in government, but I actually almost cringe when I hear the word co-design, because I just don't know if it's true. If someone is deciding how the money is being spent, is it a co-design process? It's definitely not Indigenous-led if they're not the ones deciding where the money is spent. So I often reflect to people and say, you know what, good engagement is way better than poor co-design. And we really need to get that expectation right when we enter into these conversations with mob. And definitely, if you think you can genuinely do co-design, I'm all for it. Of course, I'm going to talk about the second one, is recognising culturally significant entities. And when I talk about culturally significant entities, I mean species, plants and animals, and ecological communities that are really important to Indigenous communities. Not for predetermined values like threatened species or migratory species, but because it is part of their knowledge system and that they need to understand what's happening. And so actually working with communities to say, hey, what are your culturally significant entities? And more importantly, how do you want to manage them? And really integrating that into your planning mechanisms. The second one, I've got my little phone on here so I keep my minutes, but everyone's adding me on LinkedIn, I think, so I'm getting some notifications. I might just turn it over. Sorry, I was also looking, I'm the primary contact. My kids have just started school this year and it's not really going that well, so I'm like, I hope that's not the school ringing me. Anyway, sorry. There's a lot of mothers in this room, I'm sure you understand my pain. The third one is connected cultural landscapes. I think often we get stuck in this idea of Western boundaries, LGAs, national parks, whatever they may be, and I really think we need to step out of that. And we need to think about our landscape, our land and seascapes, as a continued, connected system. And why is it that we feel like we only need to work within our boundaries? What if we spoke to mob and said, hey, what are the cultural corridors and pathways for the koala, for example? And then instead of just saying, hey, I've got this empty block here that I want to plant koala trees on, we're actually restoring that songline up into the hills, the ancient pathway of the koala. What would that mean? How can we work together with the conservation network and actually start to join these things up in a traditional manner? The next one is about funding. Cultural loading, set-aside funding, or risk-free funding, where we actually feel comfortable with saying, hey, we're going to try something different. It might not be tested, it might not be the way we would do it, but we can see the value in it. I think about restoration projects. My time at Wadjumup at Rottnest Island, I did a lot of restoration projects. We'd come back and we'd be like, yes, we planted 1,000 trees today and we had 30 volunteers and, it was this big celebration. You know what? We never went back to that site to check it out, except for when they were doing environmental monitoring. But I never went back there. And I planted all these trees and we do it again and again and again, trying to get rid of dune encroachment. But when I went out with Mob, I went for a week with all of community. We shared stories, we exchanged knowledge, we sat in country. We might have only planted 30 trees. But you know what, 10 years ago, that happened, and I still get a photo of that tree every year. I know what's happening to that tree, I'm connected to it. That is a different way of knowing and being. I see that as a transformational approach to restoration and conservation, not a transactional one. It's not about measured outcomes. And so how do we actually think about conservation in a different lens and invest more into that whole system? Number 5, joined up funding and mutual benefits. It occurs to me that we are in a really restricted funding envelope, and sometimes we compete with each other instead of working together. When do we actually think about working together for these grants as a collective instead of submitting multiple grants and hoping yours wins? Why don't we work together and say, hey, let's do this in our collective network? When are we going to start talking to people like health and education and saying, hey, you know what? Conservation's much more than environmental outcomes. It's well-being outcomes, it's cultural outcomes, and it can even be economic outcomes. When do we join up those services and funding buckets, and how does that work? Number 6, now, Chairman over here asked me if I was going to say anything controversial. These next 2 might be a little bit controversial. I'm not sure how it will be received. But I often think about how do we compensate traditional owners when they decide to step back from cultural practice for the betterment of conservation? Why is it that when a fisherman hands in his licence, we give him a huge compensation and say, thank you, thanks so much for doing that for environment. But when it comes to Mob, we're just expected to do it. We talked about the richness of that cultural practice and how it binds us as a community and how it actually looks after our spirit and our well-being. Just because we're not conducting that cultural practice, it's not just about that animal. It has other ramifications in terms of kinship, knowledge, and health and well-being. And so I think that we need to come to a point when we're talking about those, maybe you want to call them trade-offs, that we actually think, well, we need to compensate you for that. The second one, another maybe controversial one, is about knowing your place and making space. We see a lot of really goodwill where we have these partnerships with mobs, with IPAs, or even joint management in national parks. But when does that journey start and end? When do we actually hand over and say, hey, you've got this now, you can go into sole management? You know, even if I think about Uluru, the national park, it was 34 years before they actually stopped people climbing on the rock from when traditional owners first asked them to stop. Is that joint management? How do we move from that then into sole management? I think that we really do need to do some thinking about that, and part of that links to how we actually measure success. To me, to become obsolete in that relationship is great. We shouldn't be worried about that. We should be stepping away from some of these joint partnerships and letting Mob actually take ownership and drive that. And you know, I've kind of talked about how we measure success a little bit throughout these little seeds of information. But for me, I think we really do need to move towards a biocultural lens, objectives and indicators. So we're not just measuring environmental outcomes. We're starting to think about social, economic, well-being, cultural, and they should be place-based. Okay, I'm one more, I think. My last one is about building a pipeline of talent. In the last fortnight, I've seen so many amazing positions come out for Indigenous engagement or knowledge brokers within the ENGO sector, and I really do acknowledge and welcome that. But when I see those positions, they're kind of like those middle management positions, and I think, well, where is the pipeline? Even for me, who's connected into community, I'm like, oh, who would I send that job to? We need to make space for young ones coming through, and then once we're finished in those middle management positions, we need some leadership positions as well. And so I think as a sector, potentially not in each of these individual ENGOs, but as a sector we need to think about that pipeline and that journey from ranger to middle management to leadership. And we need to be able to think about how can we actually facilitate that where mob can stay on country. Because otherwise we're not going to have the talent to pull through the system. So, a couple little seeds. Someone said to me the other day that, usually when you give these talks, only people will remember 3 things. So I hope that one of those ideas sticks with you and you take it back to your organisation and you think about how can you implement it. I truly believe that by working together and listening to each other and embracing the wisdom of Indigenous knowledge, that we can create a world where our children will thrive, where we will be happy to say we've left them in a better place. So let's work together to care for country, not just for ourselves, but for our future generations who come after us. Thank you.
Thank you, Teagan, for those really important and practical insights. If we are effectively to manage this country, we will need to do it together. This is something that I know both Rachel and myself are both passionate about, around how do we do that biocultural piece and how do we spend the time to listen and learn. I take away your koala songline. I think that's a great idea, and we are all struggling with, the land tenure and do I manage to the fence? Do I need the fence? So I think, that rethinking that and starting from that is such an important place to be. Now we're heading into our second networking break, and I'm aware that we're slightly late, so I won't be told off too much, hopefully. But we'll have a Q&A after, to further explore Teagan's insights. And so if you've got any questions, we'll have a QR code on the screen, so send through your questions, and Rachel and myself will also be part of the panel. Virtual attendees, please pop your questions in the Q&A in Zoom, and we'll include some of these as well. Enjoy your next networking break and see you very shortly.
Yeah. Huge thanks to people that use the QR code. Because we run high tech around here, yes we do, we've had them come through to our phones. So a number of questions, sometimes there are multiple questions asked different ways, so the team curate those and theme them up and then send them across. We're going to keep question time fairly short because we know we get feedback every year that you place so much value, of course, not only on hearing insights, but getting to discuss the material and content that was being shared today. So we're going to jump right into questions, keep it short, and at the same time, if there are questions you asked that didn't get through the text machine that's going on out there, see how high tech I am? The text machine. We're sticking around, so yeah, we'll make sure that we can cover that off. First question I'm going to put out there for anyone to jump in and answer. Do you have any advice for people at the start of their career who are passionate about conservation?
We'll let Teagan go first. Okay, Teagan. You're the special guest.
Yeah, it's working. I think for me, I reflect on the start of my career, and I think being open to opportunities and going for opportunities is really important. But I also think investing in yourself is really important. For me, things like my emotional intelligence and my communication skills, I'm still working on them, but, I think that you need to continually invest in yourself to be able to get that progression that you want.
I would add to, don't lose the passion. When I first did my postgraduate in environmental science, they'd never had an accounting graduate actually want to do environmental science. I had to get special exemption because they didn't quite know what to do with a Bachelor of Commerce. Anyway, I've pursued it. It's been the undying passion throughout my career, And to fall back into conservation has just been probably one of the most magical moments. So don't give up. Just follow it. Passion allows you to find yourself.
And I would say thanks for the question, and attending events like this is a great start, or joining online for those that are online. And also, it may not be that dream job that you can actually step into straight away. My first job in this field was as a live encounters officer. I saw it advertised through Zoos Victoria, and I thought, wow, live encounters officer. I just finished my Bachelor of Science, majored in zoology. And I realised whilst applying for the role that you dressed up as a butterfly and taught kids about the life cycle of a butterfly. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it, and hopefully I'm really good at it, and I get another job along the way in Zoos Vic, and it worked for me, so I'd encourage you to take that too.
Yeah, I'd agree. I had that ranger thing that I think we all had. We all start with that.
Yeah, that's right.
You get butterfly wings.
A question's just come through. I'm going to ask Teagan to answer because it says for Teagan. Cultural lead burning is a broad term. Has there been discussions around specific terminologies that recognises burn purpose for that mob?
Yeah, probably not. I'm not the best person to ask for this. I'm not a cultural burning expert. But I think what I will say is that yes, there is different nuancing to language. Different mob feel differently about different terminology and what it means. You'll often hear things like right way fire used as well. But I think that for me, fire, it's great, and it's really taking hold in the conservation space, which is really good for mob. But I think my main message would be there is other types of traditional management that we need to also embrace.
Great, thanks. Live question coming in direct from Claire O'Rourke. So do we get photos of you in the butterfly suit? No.
But I will accept donations for them.
Do you want me to ask?
No. How do you stay connected in your why when juggling other commitments? Teagan. I like your EPBC example of labour.
Yeah, I think I have this tendency to overcommit, which maybe most of us do, because not only was I in labour for that, but I'd also signed up to a PhD when my baby was 6 weeks old. So, maybe I need to go see someone about that. Look, I think for me that kind of juggle, it is real, and in that you need to make sure that you're staying true to your kind of own purpose. Like for me, I always think about conversations that I had with my pop, and kind of saying being a countryman comes with great responsibility. This is your obligation for life to look after country, and so I think that that's just a part of my core vision. When someone asks me, will you come and do this? I always reflect, is it aligned? And often it is. And I mean, just to take a little bit, in the break, a lot of people came up and wanted to talk to me more about other things. If you didn't get a chance to talk to me, please send me an email. I'm very open to talking about opportunities and helping you with those ideas.
Beautiful. I might go to the next question because I think that was beautifully answered, and I would feel like a bit of a fraud if I pretended I had it all worked out anyway. But yet I'm sure there are many of us in this room that ask it all the time. This one is, if your organisation isn't directly involved in conservation, how can you ensure strategy is planet-centric? Do you want to have a go at that, Corinne?
Yes. So I think part of it is that recognition, and I think we've got a lot to learn from First Peoples here, is that we are part of planet. So, businesses don't thrive unless we actually look after the land and how we interact with it. So everything you do within your business, whether it's nature related or not, is think about what is your impact. Is it about waste? Is it about water? Is it about how you travel? Is it about who you lend to? Is it, you've just got to work through your supply chain, and each bit matters. It's not, conservation organisations will not be able to make the difference that's required without the rest of the economy working with us.
Yep. Teagan, did you want to add anything?
I think that there's also a responsibility for businesses outside of conservation to open the doors. I reflect on the last year of conferences that we've had, and there's been lots of talks about philanthropic money and money flowing freely for conservation. And I just kind of want to make the point, particularly for Mob, how do you open those doors? How do you actually broker those relationships to support your programs and developments? And so I think even if your business isn't directly aligned with conservation, that you can open doors for people and you can support their programs.
Great, thanks. It's such an important question, and each year I'm invited to speak at the Small Giants Academy, and I know there are a few people in the room here, and they bring together a big cohort of people every year who often are from business who are asking that very question. So if you've asked that question and you're feeling on your own, check in on the Small Giants network, but there are others as well who really get us thinking about how we place our values at the centre of our decision making, unashamedly, forthright, and really challenge those paradigms, not thinking about nature as an extra, but as actually a superpower to any business strategy, and just fairness and justice overall. Thanks for the question. Do you want to ask another one?
The next one. Okay. How can funders prioritise frameworks that protect Indigenous intellectual property and knowledge while still enabling impactful solutions?
It was always going to be a data question. Look, I tend to think about ICIP in a really different way, I think. When we're engaging with community around projects and conservation work, we often think that we need to record everything. And for me, I think the most important thing with ICIP is that it doesn't belong to the partner, it belongs to traditional owners. And sometimes when you're sitting down having a yarn with Mob, they might share something that is ICIP, and that's a privilege for you, but it doesn't mean that you have to write it down. It doesn't mean that you have to embed it into your program and your framework. It is just something that they are willing to share at that time. And I often think about things like culturally significant entities, and even consciously when I was doing that PhD work, I never once asked Mob, why is that species culturally significant? Can you tell me what it does? Can you tell me how it functions in the system? I just accepted that it was culturally significant and talked about what is the Indigenous-led management. And I think that data question, while it is tricky, what we need to aspire to is Mob owning and managing their own data in a way that is right for them.
I also think that when funders are looking at some of these projects, and we were talking about it at work the other day, to get to the right outcomes, we need trust, and that takes time. And I think what Teagan's also sharing, and part of this is that yarning and the stories. That takes time, and that costs money. Being able to have the space to build trust and to just listen for all parties is essential, and that's often not built into models that are looking for an impact or an outcome. So I think there's, from a funding perspective, a bit of trust that we'll get there, we're working there, but we're coming from a long way, and we've got to do a lot of listening before we can move forward.
Yeah. Got time just for one more question. Corinne, do you want to pick the last question? And then if your question hasn't been asked and answered, do stick around, please, at the end, because we can definitely sink our teeth into it with you.
So final question. We're in the lead up to International Women's Day. Is there a woman who inspires you most in your work? Teagan. I've got to think about what mine is first.
I know, too many, right? It's funny because every woman that is connected to me, particularly Aboriginal women, I've just seen Liz Wren, she'll probably be shamed because I've just named her, but she's here today and I saw her straight away and I felt uplifted and inspired and, confident to come up and talk today. And so I think that it's not just one, it's many.
What I can add, in the last year, I lost my mother And my mother was, for me, one of those critical people. When I went and told her that, I was going to do that postgraduate, she bought me a copy of Rachel Carson's Silent Spring and said, just hurry up. So I have the just hurry up voice in my head regularly, and I'm trying to hurry.
And my answer would be, there is many, I agree, and it's the collective energy across this room that's absolutely inspiring, but I won't take that cop out. So I'm going to say, if you haven't yet in this morning's session introduced yourself to Karen Alexander, sitting over there, make sure that you do. Because she's an inspiration in her own right, and be sure to ask her about her career, because when times get tough, I often think about the path that she's traversed over the years, and we stand on many shoulders, hers included. Thank you. Okay. I'm going to wrap up question time. Thanks so much again, and thank you for the questions. And it feels like I should stand up to do this next bit, but speaking of amazing women, I've had the opportunity to work on and off over the years with our next speaker and our final speaker for today, Christina Tonkin, who is Managing Director from Corporate Finance at ANZ. And before you clap and welcome her, I will just say we talk about trailblazers. Sometimes there are people working within big systems who are incredibly patient, nudging change at every opportunity. Christina is one of those, and I want to say thank you for your work, Christina. Cheers.
Thank you, Rachel. Wow, what a big room. This is truly spectacular. Good morning, everyone. My name's Christina Tonkin. I'm the Managing Director of Corporate Finance at ANZ. Like others before me, I would like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the land in which we are gathering this morning, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and acknowledge their elders, past and present, and their emerging leaders, not just across Melbourne, but across this state and across the country. And I'd also like to acknowledge any traditional leaders who are in the room today. It's been an absolute pleasure to join you this morning for this absolutely really amazing breakfast. Rich conversations like these today help us develop our collective understanding of the issues, perspectives, and urgent needs in the conservation sector and the critical role that Indigenous communities play. So I'm here also to do a bit of a vote of thanks. So I'm going to ask, for some audience participation. Dr. Mandy Nicholson's had to leave us, but I think that was a spectacular welcome to country, and obviously all those fabulous dancers. And of course, Sheena Watt MP has also had to leave us, but I thought she gave a very good, dialogue about what is happening in Victoria across the government. Teagan Shields, I think I can call you Dr. Teagan Shields, of course, I think gave us a lot of education about what is happening in the Indigenous sector and how as, individuals, no matter what we're doing, either personally or in our professions, can connect better in with Indigenous communities that have been caring for country for over 60,000 years. Of course, to the fabulous Rachel Lowry and Corinne Proske, well done today on organising this. I'd also like to give a big shout out to Bush Heritage and the team at Bush Heritage for the recent acquisition of Nil Desperatum, 4,037 hectares, 150 kilometres northwest of Bourke in the Murray-Darling. And I'm sure there's many donors to Bush Heritage in here and online that have kind of made that possible. So thank you for that. I'd like to thank everybody this morning for opening up on the challenges and pathways and actions to protect and restore nature. The opportunity to elevate women who play a leading role in this sector is what drew ANZ to being a sponsor for this event today. While it's our first time sponsoring this particular event, we have since 2017 run a speaker series around the country, Women for the Environment, which is designed to bring women from the corporate sector, the finance sector and the nature conservancy sector closer together to have a discussion on the restoration and protection of nature and biodiversity. This year we're running 3 of them, Newcastle, Darwin and Adelaide, and I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm just going to speak a little bit about what's happening at ANZ. As a purpose-driven organisation, ANZ recognises the critical role that we play in shaping a world where people and communities thrive. Through ANZ's climate and environment strategy, the bank has set a global target to fund and facilitate at least $100 billion in social and environmental activities by 2030. This is being achieved through customer financing activities and direct investments, and includes initiatives that help lower carbon emissions and seek to protect nature and restore biodiversity. Since the target was announced in April 2023, we've funded and facilitated almost $39 billion across 226 customer transactions. In late 2024, we also refreshed Sustainable Development Goals bond framework, and this year we've already issued €1 billion in Sustainable Development Goal bonds. Also in 2024, late 24, we announced that we were partnering with Farming for the Future, a not-for-profit research and change program founded in 2021 by the MacDoc Foundation that seeks to progress Australian agricultural's understanding of on-farm natural capital and its management. As part of this partnership, Farming for the Future is working directly with a number of the bank's agribusiness customers, supporting them through a program which aims to quantify relationships between natural capital and the productivity, profitability and resilience of producers across the country. At a more customer level, late last year we also worked with conservation partners and the owners of our Teamas station right up in Cape York around the protection of native wildlife habitat in the Cape York area, using carbon offsets to preserve land on our Teamas station, which is home to the endangered golden-shouldered parrot. And we're working also with Dr. Jodie Gunn and the fabulous team at the Australian Land Conservation Alliance on this year's Private Land Conservation Conference, PLC 25, which is going to be held in Cairns. There's still so much opportunity to build better networks between the finance sector and the land conservancy sector, and I'm certainly looking forward to doing that in 2025. Now, I know that everybody's got a busy day, so I'm going to wrap it up here. Like a lot of people, this is a personal journey. It's a very special day for me today. A year ago today, my mother passed away at the age of 96. She'd be very jealous that she's missing out on this and seeing all the great conversations. She was a passionate conservationist, a member of the Oatley Flora and Fauna for well over 50 years, and I was brought up, that's in the Georges River in Sydney, on many sort of cases of preservation of mangroves along the Georges River and all sorts of things, so she would be super delighted. My parents were the former owners of Scottsdale, which of course is now a reserve for bush heritage south of Canberra. So I'd like to again once thank Trust for Nature and Bush Heritage Australia for hosting the event today, for everybody for coming along today. ANZ is proud to support the strong and growing community of female environmental practitioners across the country. Thank you, I hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and I know that we're going to have prizes. So I'm going to pass it back to Rachel. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christina. Thanks for sharing those insights, and and thanks for your family's history in Scottsdale. It's an absolute privilege to be able to honour your mother's legacy through the work that we manage through that reserve. Thank you. Okay, this is our Oprah moment, as we've called it before, where we get to give out some prizes, and our two 13-year-old sons realise they've won nothing.
I've already been asked about Patagonia twice.
But let's get onto it, shall we? All right. First up, we have a Eucalypt Australia prize pack donated by the wonderful Linda Baird, CEO of Eucalypt Australia. And I see Linda there over the table 7. But oh, hello! Yes, hello again. Table 7, right there. Linda, I believe also that you were keen for us to give a shout out, and rightly so, to National Eucalypt Day on the 23rd of March, since we're about celebrating all things worthy. So please do check in on the Eucalypt Australia website. Now, the winner of this prize pack is Sophie Barker from City of Whittlesea, table 48. Yep. Could you come down and collect your prize pack, please? And maybe feel free to give Linda a high five along the way. Awesome. Thank you very much.
On prize 2. Prize 2 is a $250 Country Road gift card. Thanks to the team at Country Road, a number of which are here today and who've donated the prize, but who've also been partnering with us on the Plains Wanderer. So, prize 2 is Cassie Douglas at the Biodiversity Conservation Trust at the New South Wales event. Now, I understand there's an event.
Awesome.
I think there's several New South Wales events. So, congratulations, Cassie Douglas.
And we'll be sure to get it to you. Thanks heaps. Okay, prize 3 is the $500 Patagonia prize that Luca hasn't won. And the winner, however, is on table 19, narrowing it down. You can hear everyone on table 19. And it's Julie Lyford from Weller. Woo!
And prize 4, our final prize today, is a 2-night stay at the Mount Avoca Ecolux Lodge in the beautiful Pyrenees. A huge thank you to Zoe McHugh and the team at Mount Avoca for providing today's major prize. We very much appreciate your generosity, and we know this room loves hanging out in nature. So, prize 4 is Amy Downey from the Royal Botanic Gardens.
Congratulations. Congratulations to all the prize winners, and a huge thanks to all the prize givers as well. That's really wonderful. All right, as we start to head towards a close, I just want to mention the lovely native plant centrepieces that are at the middle of everyone's table. Now, for those that have been in future years, you might have gone, oh, normally it's a bit of a kangaroo paw sitting in the middle. I don't know whether David Cantrell is in the room, but at last year's event, he came up to me and said, you know what, I love that you've got a bit of flora on the tables, Rachel, but I reckon we can do better. And so, thanks to the Royal Botanic Gardens, we've done exactly that. These plants in the middle of the table are an endangered species. They're Grevillea dimorpha, which is an endemic plant to the Grampians, also known as garryword, recently under threat from bushfires and considered at risk in its native habitat. So, thanks again to the Royal Botanic Gardens for bringing these plants. It's incredible. If you have, thank you. So, if you have a coloured sticker on the back of your place card, then you have won this beautiful native plant to take home. Our boys are like...
So, I'm just going to draw us to a close. Sorry. The Grevillea is exciting. Yes. And there is time for further networking afterwards for those who can stay. But I just would like to draw the formalities to an end and would like to thank everyone both here in the room and online for joining us. And online I was advised, sorry, I have to go through the notes, that there is the south coast of New South Wales and northwest Sydney, Darwin, and multiple locations in Victoria. So that's a pretty amazing spread of locations.
Yeah, and I met someone who's flown down from Queensland to be
Yes.
here this morning for this event.
So
It's amazing.
we are humbled. Now, a very special thanks to our fabulous keynote speaker, Teagan Shields.
Yeah.
A huge shout out to our sponsors, corporate partner ANZ, events partners TBH, Casinio Environmental, Kingwood Mallisons and Yarra Valley Water. This would not be possible without your support. Thank you. Thank you also to Dr. Mandy Nicholson and the Jiri dancers. What a fantastic and relevant welcome to country. The Sofitel for hosting us in this amazing room, and for the team, the Bush Heritage and Trust for Nature team, in particular Megan and Josie, for keeping Rachel and I online and organised. It's a job.
I noticed you didn't say on time.
No. And finally, a really big thanks to two of our two favourite champions, Coop and Luca, at the head table. As we have intimated, we have brought our two 13-year-old sons, and that happened just one night at dinner. We realised we were facing different challenges at work and very similar challenges at home.
Hashtag Snapchat.
Part of changing the world starts at home, and we're working on it, although I have been told I give nature more time. But I was inspired this morning when at 6:15, and we were supposed to leave at 6:30, my son starts changing the water in his aquarium. I didn't lose it, just a little bit.
And I enjoyed it before when I was speaking to you all and Coops was going, Mum, they've given me eggs. I don't like eggs. I'm like, I'll do that later. Boys, thanks for joining us today. And may you always continue to celebrate diversity and equity in every sector that you're in. Cheers. On that note, I'm going to give a shout out to our virtual audience. Thanks so much for tuning in. I guess now this is the point at which we let you switch off and get on with your day, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2026.
No more videos of us.
We're not going to treat you to any more videos. Enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks again for switching in, streaming in. That's what we say, isn't it? Streaming. I'm going to pause. On that note, formalities have concluded. Please feel free to stick around, and if you would love a photo, we do have an event photographer here who is absolutely willing. Thank you, Gianna. Gianna is willing to take your pick, whole table, any sort of group that you like. Come on up, and looking forward to continuing the conversation. Cheers to protecting healthy country forever.
Now, one more Plains Wanderers fact. You can't go without them. So, very unusual for nature, the female Plains Wanderer is larger and more coloured than the male Plains Wanderer. And second fact, the male Plains Wanderer is responsible for child rearing. I think that's a good end for today. Thank you.